Okay, here's the setup for the bearing carrier puller. Again, this is from 2850 Bounty. He recommends grade 8 ready rod. I couldn't get any on short notice. This stuff did work. I had to put a little tiny bit of heat in this area and she popped right out. I think that's probably because of the aviation former gasket, probably a little sticky. Anyway, you put the propeller nut on the back here. They call it the spinner. And all you do is you move these nuts so that the plate wants to move towards the rear. And as it moves towards the rear, it puts a compression force in here and pulls this guy out. I should say it really pushes it out. It's not really a puller, it's more of a pusher, but that's sort of semantics. Works great. I just put tension on it, put a tiny bit of heat here. Took about 10 seconds, honestly, and went pop. And I got a groove there. And I just kept on working it off, and it pulled it out nice and straight. That ensures that you don't do any damage to the bearing in here. And there's a needle bearing up in this area. And of course the tower gear, or the end gear, whatever you want to call it, on the tower shaft comes down here. And just make sure that you don't put any sideways strain or craziness on that on those joints at all. And works great. So thanks very much for 2850 Bounty. He's a regular guy on BaylinerOwners.com. I guess is BOC. Anyway, BOC.com. And he also is on lots of other boards and stuff. He helps people out a lot. So big shout out to him. This one definitely worked, and it was fantastic. Okay. I got the lower section removed here. The paper towel. See up in there, there's a top gear. In the very front, there's a needle bearing where this shaft gets its locating. And you can see down in there, there's the pit for draining out all the old crappy oil. That's not my focus. My focus is this side. Prop seal in there is shot. So, you know, here she is. But the next step in getting to that seal, I can take those O-rings off, but I'll just leave them for now. Next step is to take off these nuts here. And I'll do that now, and we'll see how she breaks down. I'm going to pull these O-rings. Reason being, I'm going to apply some heat to this surface here, warm this up. There's a carrier inside here that's got to come, or sorry, a bearing has got to come out of this carrier. This piece here is the carrier. So I'm going to heat it up, and then there's a couple ways to do this. Put it up like this and tap on those flange edges where the holes are, probably with a wood block or something. The other way is to grab those flange edges and drop this on a piece of wood, and one of those two methods will pop this guy apart. One thing to note about when you undo the nuts on this retainer ring here, the nuts are kind of captive. They won't come all the way out, or at least they didn't on my unit. They ended up hitting this little plate here, and I couldn't remove them. After it taps out, then the nuts want to fall out. So when you tap it out, be in a good place that you can, you know, capture those nuts when they decide to fall out. For these seals, pretty much I'm just going to take a screwdriver and tap them down and out of there. Again, the orientation, you can see that one there. You can see the groove in it. So it's open to the inside, and it'd be strange to see that one open to the outside because they're supposed to be back to back, but maybe that's how it's done. We'll see. Okay, so this is how they tapped out. So they were sitting like that. And that's the face side of the seal. So the outer seal, that's the face side. And the inner lip faces inwards, just like a wheel bearing. This one seems to also be lip side to the inside. Now, I was told these were back to back, meaning they either be like that, or more likely like that. So I'm definitely going to review that in the literature and figure out how they were supposed to go, because it seems as though having them like so, with the two faces facing the outside, Doesn't seem right. They're supposed to be back to back. Anyway, we'll find out what's going on. So I did a bit more review online and looked very closely at the original seals and also the Volvo workshop manual. And this is how they're supposed to be. My drive was done wrong. The lip is the spring side. In other words, not the flat edge, but the inside, the cupped side. And one of those should be pointing in towards the oil. And it should be flat side to flat side, and the other lip should be pointing out towards the water. So gear, seal pointing in, seal pointing out towards the water. And so I'll fix that up on my drive. It'll be kind of good because the seal will run at a different spot. This one was correct. This one was not. The water side was not. So hopefully that'll help out a little bit. Okay, if you had water in your drive like I did, the reason I'm changing the prop shaft seals, this is a good time to check these bearing these gear surfaces. Look for chipping or scoring. And also inside the drive, a little gear up there, give her a spin, make sure she's in good shape. Reason for that is I got an indication from one of the posts that if you have water in there for an extended period, these guys like to wear out and crack and chip and do nasty stuff. So make sure you inspect those before you go back together. And also this giant ass bearing, mine appears to be just fantastic. We're gonna let that ride on my unit, but yeah, check that one out. Back a day later, got some parts here. I actually tried to order a GLM 83870, and my parts guy said he had these instead, and that they were probably better by Crom Marine. I guess it's from Sweden. And as we know, Volvo's from Sweden, so that must mean they're great. So anyway, they're pretty inexpensive, like, I don't know, 30 bucks each. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do that. So they got the 2 big O-rings I need. They got the 2 seals I need. All this other stuff is spare, I guess. I don't really need it, but just because I'm not breaking it right down. But good value for the money, that's for sure. Here we go. Here's the seals. This is how we install them. Cup side to the outside, cup side to the inside, or seal lip, if you want to call it that. Cleaned out in the bottom there. It was a little bit grungy and scraped all the BS out of there, so it's looking pretty good, ready for seal installation. And I'll get my socket that matches the outer ring here. It's a little unusual, like this one will go in no problem pushing on the flat side. I've never installed a seal before from the back side like that, so I'm going to have to get something that matches this exactly. I'm a little nervous about pressing that in, but these weren't super tight, so I think it's probably going to go in pretty easy. Okay, my seals are in. The reverse seal there tapped in pretty nicely. I used this big socket. It's not quite big enough because you got a perfect fit, but I just sort of picked up the edge of the seal like that and moved around and tapped it in nice and square. And it didn't take too much persuasion to get in there. So then I applied some just some engine assembly grease to the seals so they have a little bit of slippery to run on as they run in. Next step is to install the shims, and then the carrier can go back together. So I'll clean these shims, make sure they're spotless, insert them onto that ridge right there, and then we'll reassemble this carrier position. Okay, so the shaft is going to take a couple of taps to get in. I'm going to mount it vertically in the vise like so, and just tap it down, making sure that this aligns up with the bolts when it gets close. Hopefully you can see that. You obviously don't want it to jam, so when it gets close, when that bearing gets pressed in far enough, definitely going to want that those rings that I had when it came apart regarding the nuts not fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press it on partly and then install the nuts and then finish the pressing in. Okay, it's starting to happen. This bearing that sits in here has quite a tight fit going into the aluminum carrier. So you got a couple of choices. You can bash on this, bash on the end of this shaft. Not a good idea. So what I did is I took the shaft assembly and I put it in the deep freeze for an hour or two. And I took the this guy here, and just before I brought it out, I torched this for about, I don't know, 2 minutes with a propane torch just to get it warm. Not crazy hot because you don't want to damage your brand new seals, but so I just torched it and then I just checked it with my fingers on the inside, and I got it just nice and warm to the touch, but not, you know, not hot, right? And then this guy just slipped right in. It was like, it just was, you could slip it in, slip it out, slip it in, slip it out. And that's important because you got to get these stupid nuts on during that procedure, and it's a pain in the ass to get all these nuts on because you're putting it down and you're sliding it up to get the next nut on, you're putting it down, sliding the next nut up to get it on. Anyway, that's how you do that. Get that shaft cold, get this guy warm, you'll have a much easier time with these nuts. And these are just 7/16, and I just tightened them up just so. You know, they're not a huge nut, so don't crank, you know, smash on them, but you know, nice and tight. And that's it, it's good to go. So we're ready to put the assembly back together here. It's gonna have to mesh with that gear up there. So as you're bringing this in, just make sure you're either turning the shaft or turning the universal joint. Got to have it in gear so that it actually turns this gear down below here. And just, you know, wait for it to click in as you're drawing it into place. You don't want to force anything, break anything, bend anything. That'd be horrible. The thing I'm going to say is don't forget your 2 O-rings, O-ring 1, O-ring 2. And on this mating surface, you're supposed to put the old, good old aviation sealant. And it also says use the aviation sealant for the 2 bolts you put in here. So just a word to the wise, go ahead and get some of that former gasket number 3. It's aviation former gasket. They call it number 3. Oh, there it is. Number 3H. Right there. 3H. Anyway, that's what you want right there. I do these surfaces. This guy here is going to get the former gasket on it. A little bit of acetone. You just wipe her down, make sure there's no oil. Take a screwdriver or something, or just try and flake off any scrub if there's any scrub. Just get her nice and clean and neat for that former gasket to do. Here's a nice thing. The rods you made for removing the carrier assembly also work great for reinstalling them. Just through a washer in between the nut and the housing, and I can draw them in nice and evenly. And no muss, no fuss, no hammers, no nothing. Last but not least, there go the Allen head bolts in there. You're supposed to put this aviation former gasket on threads on this one too. So I'll do that and then run them into 25, 28 foot-pounds, something like that. Consult your local manual, but I just usually kind of go, you know, pretty tight. That's how they were, pretty tight. So yeah, and that's the rest of it's fairly straightforward. So enjoy your drive. Hope that helped.